Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to this webinar on how to pre-think assumptions. My name is Rajat Sudana. I'm one of the co-founders of e-GMAT, and I'm going to be your main host today. Joining me in this webinar or supporting me in this webinar is first of all is Aarti. Aarti is a subject matter expert. For those of you e-GMAT students, you would recognize her if she responds to your doubts. The e-GMAT forum. She's also the creator of many inference questions. And then the second person who's there is Sandeep. He's a senior GMAT strategy expert at e-GMAT. Before I start, I want to just actually change one thing over here. And yes. So in this webinar, we're going to talk about pre-thinking. Pre-thinking is an essential skill in to a GMAT critical reasoning question. It's very similar to the meaning-based approach in SC or reading strategies in reading comprehension. So it's a fundamental approach. You can apply this to assumption, strengthen, weaken, evaluate, logically complete, and boldface questions. In this webinar, we're going to focus very specifically on assumption question, and the foundation that we lay down today, that foundation will help you answer the questions in these other topics as well. Albeit you need a bit of modification to it, but the method essentially remains the same. I also want to thank you guys for joining me today. I know depending on where you are, so the situation is not great. Even at e-GMAT, we're operating at about 60% capacity because of COVID, and so I truly appreciate that you guys have joined me today, and I promise I'll try my best to make it worth your while. With that, I want to just talk about some announcements. I'm going to answer some questions that a few of you asked before I get started with the webinar. So for those of you who are e-GMAT students, and for those of you actually not e-GMAT students, even for them, we have a major launch this week on Tuesday. That's on Scholarinium 2.0. It's one of the bigger projects that we have taken in the last 2 years. By the way, if you're an e-GMAT student, can you select yes on the top? If you're an e-GMAT student, if you're a paid student. So we're going to talk about what was the thought process behind Scholarinium 2.0? What is it that we have implemented? How can you benefit from it? And in general, you'd also get to see where is it that we are going with Scholarinium 2.0 and what future enhancements can you see. So the year 2021 has been a year where we've innovated like crazy, and the roadmap is again very, very similar. We completely revamped the quant course. We've added about 500 video solutions. Scholarinium is one other addition. We've actually added another 100 questions as well. I'm going to talk all about that and then the future enhancements. So if you've not registered for this, you can click on this, get your event pass and register for that. Then some of you have been asking about a few other things. So we have a free algebra webinar that is tomorrow. Again, 24 hours from now. In this, you're going to focus on two topics: inequalities and absolute value. We're going to start from the very basics and go to the most advanced data sufficiency and problem solving questions. Then we have a free GMAT strategy webinar that is a week from now. This is again for those of you, many of you said you're beginning your prep. In fact, 55% of you say you've not taken a date as of yet. This webinar is something that these 2 hours that you spend on the free GMAT strategy webinar will help you define that study plan, will help you define those personalized metrics. Some of you were asking, how long will it take for me to prepare? The answer is very different depending on what your starting abilities are, and this webinar will tell you how that is different. So if you've not registered for that one, definitely do that. Let me actually hide these. With that, let's kind of get to know you guys a bit better. I asked this question: when do you guys plan to take the GMAT? The majority of you have not taken a date as of yet. We also have a good number of you who are in that 46 to 75 days. And then we have about between 5 and 10% of folks in various brackets over here. And then let's kind of get this one other response to another question. And this one for me is interesting in many ways. So what's your target GMAT score? Because it just shows your, what is it that you're aiming for, and depending on this, you can then talk about the kind of effort you need to put in and the kind of skills that you need to build. So this question says, what's your target GMAT score? And again, based on, you still have data coming in, but what I can see is that about half of you are in that 730 to 750 bucket. Good number if you are in the 760 plus as well. You know, similarly, very similar number in the 710, 720, and about 5% in the 600 to 700 bucket. Thank you very much for those responses. Let me just go into the presentation pane over here. Let me hide this. So what you see is a presentation pane. Below this, you see a question and answer pane over here. So during this webinar, if you have any questions, you can post those questions in the Q&A pod or Q&A pane. That way, Aarti or Sandeep can take those questions and you know, your questions will get answered and we'll get through this webinar in time. This webinar is being recorded for those of you who just joined, and we will upload the recording on our YouTube channel in about 12 hours or so, and we will send the recording to you guys as well. The overall duration of this webinar, core webinar is going to be about 2 hours or so, but I'm going to kind of talk a bit about your MB and your GMAT study plan for about 6 minutes, and then the third part over here, let me just put this part. The third part over here is optional. This is an open-ended Q&A. Reserve some time towards the end to answer any question that you have. Okay, so one thing which, you know, for those of you who've researched on e-GMAT, you would have found that, hey, e-GMAT has thousands of reviews. Most of the prep companies don't. And why is it that, how is it that one company gets so many more reviews than other? And the core difference when it comes to that piece is what we aspire to be. When you think about architectures of learning, you're going to find that there are two architectures of learning that exist today. One is what we call as the book-based architecture, or think of it as low feedback architecture, and the other is a private tutoring-based architecture. And it's documented in learning methodology that the private tutoring-based architecture, which is built around that notion of giving personalized feedback, is way more effective than the book-based architecture. And when you look at the two various online courses out there, what you're going to find is most online courses are built around this book-based architecture. Why? Because it's a lot easier to implement. It doesn't require technology investment. You can actually take off-the-shelf learning technologies and build a solution around that book-based architecture. We at e-GMAT aspire to be more around this private tutoring-based architecture, because of which we kind of build everything on our own, starting from every question to every line of code that exists on our platform that's been written by an e-GMAT employee or so. And this has allowed us to build that private tutoring-based architecture, which has allowed us to kind of deliver the kind of success that we have. And just to really kind of demonstrate one small component of that personalization that this learning architecture enables, I'm going to talk about just creating a study plan. So how do you ace a GMAT if you want to get to that score of 720 plus? 720 plus is that threshold. About 75% of you over here are aiming for that score. But again, the same methodology works for those who want to get to that 650 as well. It's just the same architecture. So the first thing you've got to do is you've got to figure out how are you going to get there? What's the shortest path to go from A to B? And what is A? A is your starting score, and B is essentially that target score or so. And this shortest path definition is what I'm going to focus on over here. But then once you define that shortest path, you've got to learn the concepts where you have those conceptual gaps. Just knowing the concepts isn't enough. You've got to also learn how to apply those concepts, and then you've got to get so good at applying those concepts that you attain a level of mastery that puts you in that top 5, top 3, or top 1 percentile, depending on the score that you're aspiring for. Okay, so with that, let's kind of build that study plan. And I'm going to take an example of a student who starts at a score of 600 and plans to get to a 720 or so. So the first thing you've got to do is to figure out where is it that you stand. And a lot of people look at that score of 600 as a singular entity. That score of 600 is actually composed of 5 different abilities, and if you live in the e-GMAT world, it's composed of 9 different abilities or so. The first job that you have to do is quantify those starting abilities. Now, these abilities are independent of one another, so the beauty of quantifying those starting abilities. So 3 in verbal, SC, CR, and RC, and 2 in quant, arithmetic and algebra geometry, is that it then allows 5 independent mini study plans and then optimized study plans for you. So once you have those starting abilities, then you have to define milestones to get to your target score. You want to get to that score of 720 or 730, there are multiple ways of getting there depending on your starting ability. I mean, score of 720 can be attained in about 30 different ways. Which way is the most optimum, where you have the highest likelihood of success and you're going to take the least amount of time, is something that you use to get to the target milestones. And once you have those defined, you then personalize your course. Now, this is an exercise, if you kind of want to do it properly, you've got to work with a private tutor, someone who knows the GMAT inside out, and would cost you about $500 or so. And when I say $500, I'm talking about US dollars, since I live in the US. So, but we've actually built a technology product that allows each one of you to do this in about 5 minutes or so. So the first thing is, I'm going to demonstrate how we do this. The first thing is you actually quantify your starting abilities. You take a sigma X mock. It's the only mock in the world that gives you ability scores. If you want your ability scores other than taking a sigma X mock, you've got to take an in-center GMAT. Then you have to pay $30 for your enhanced score report to get those starting abilities. Okay. The second step is, then once you have those starting abilities, you set those milestones. And how do you set those milestones? Which is where we build this tool called Personalized Study Planner, which allows you to build those milestones. Now, typically we in a free session we give out some free slots, but because of COVID, we're not giving out free slots this week. Next week, hopefully people recover and we will give you free slots. But I'm going to tell you how it works. You put in your starting scores, your starting quant and your starting verbal scores. This is actually a bad screenshot of the tool. Then it looks at the starting scores and gives an initial recommendation of what your quant and verbal scores are. Now, you can take this recommendation. Usually this is an excellent recommendation overall, but if you don't want this, you can actually edit this, and the system's smart enough. If you change the quant score, it automatically adjusts that verbal score. Then it tells you how should you reach that Q50. So if you choose to get to Q50, it says, okay, what arithmetic and algebra geometry abilities should you aim for, and similarly over here. And again, this is based on your starting abilities in these 5 subsections. Then it charts your study plan. So here, these are the abilities on the left that you got from your sigma X mock, the starting abilities. So these abilities, and these are the target milestones that are delivered for you. It then really tells you how much time you need in every subsection to get there. And then post the screen, you really see how should you personalize your score. Now this time takes into account how much effort you're willing to put in over here. So when you look at this over here, this is the number of hours that you can put in during a weekday versus a weekend, and you can customize it for every day. For example, you're taking a vacation day over here, you can really say, I'm going to put in 0 hours on these days, and the planner will adjust by itself. Yeah, so why did we build this? So that each one of you can build your own study plan. If you're an e-GMAT student, you probably have used this. Last year, our students built about 20,000 personalized study plans or so. Okay, and again, this has allowed them to define where they need to focus on, and here are some examples. If you are a YouTube subscriber, you can actually watch these on our YouTube channel. Okay, also you can connect with me on e-GMAT. We post about 10 articles or so every week. You can also connect with upwards of 16,000 odd students who are studying at top business schools. So if you want to reach out to an alumnus at a top B school, that'd be a way as well. Okay. With that, let's kind of get to the core of this webinar, which is how do you pre-think assumptions? And so here's how we're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how do you approach arguments today? What is your current approach? Then we're going to do a pre-thinking exercise. Pre-thinking is a skill that you develop. So we're going to start with a very simple argument, and then slowly increase the complexity of arguments as you go through these 3 arguments. And then we're going to solve 2 full-length questions. These are our official questions over here. These are some of the most 2 of the most challenging questions that you're going to see on assumptions. And then we're going to look at how should you go there. We want you to go through our free trial. There are about 20 to 25 more practice questions with high quality solutions there. And as well as we have the Scholarium free trial, which gets you another 70 to 80 questions with a similar set of high quality solutions. Okay, so at a very high level, we're going to start with how are you preparing today? How are you approaching CR questions? And then we're going to talk about what is it that's important to master assumptions, and then we're going to discuss what is it your should be approach. Okay, so let's talk about your current approach to critical reasoning, and I'm going to, on the next slide, I'm going to talk about two predominant approaches, and all you have to choose which methodology do you use over here. The two is in which, actually before that, let's kind of talk about what is pre-thinking. Pre-thinking is thinking of one assumption in your mind, one potential assumption in your mind in 15 seconds before you look at answer choices. And the reason why the portions in bold portions, the certain portions that are bolded, is because in an argument you can have multiple assumptions. We're not trying to get all of those assumptions. Similarly, we're not trying to predict the answer. A lot of people think that pre-thinking is the same as predicting the answer. No, we're not trying to do that. We're just trying to figure out what is the logic that the author uses to arrive at his conclusion, and that's why we are doing this, figuring out this one potential assumption. Once you become a skilled pre-thinker, it'll take you about 15 seconds or actually even less to do this. And you do this before you look at any of the answer choices. If you start looking at answer choices, you can throw pre-thinking out of the window. It will not work. You have to train your brain to do this before you look at answer choices. And this definition is really important, because even though pre-thinking as a term existed in the world of GMAT preparation long before e-GMAT was there as a company, no one clearly defined it. There was no pre-thinking method, and it was often confused with predicting the answer. No, we're not trying to predict the answer. We're trying to understand the logic that the author is using. Okay, so again, pre-thinking is not predicting the answer. Okay, so that's something that that I want to make sure that we're not trying to be an astrologer. All right, so how do you go about solving assumption questions today? There are two methodologies that exist today. One is people read the argument, they look at the answer choices, and they go back and forth between the argument and the answer choices, and till they reach the final candidate. The second is they read the argument, they pause, they pre-think an assumption, and then they evaluate the answer choices. They may not go back to the argument at all, but if they need to, they might go back to certain portions of the argument at some point or the other. So which methodology do you use? Is it methodology 1 or methodology 2 while solving assumption questions today? I have about 65, 70 responses out of 270 students in the webinar. Let's get a few more responses over here. 100 responses. Let's get to 110 before I broadcast results. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Thank you. I have about 150 responses or so. That's great. About half of you, and this is remarkable. You know, ever since I got 50 responses, it's been 50% here or there. So with a deviation of about 2% or so. That's phenomenal. Okay, so we want to learn how to pre-think. I want each one of you to really get to that methodology 2 over here. This is where we want to be. If you are someone who's already doing methodology 2, I want you to become a more skilled pre-thinker. I want you to do it faster. I want you to recognize what's important to be able to become a skilled pre-thinker. If you are someone who's over here, I want to make sure that that you understand why pre-thinking why and how pre-thinking can help you, and what are the next steps. Okay. Now, pre-thinking is not all-encompassing. It requires that you do certain things, and one of the most important things that that you can do to improve in critical reasoning is build that ability to visualize. A lot of people, when they read arguments in critical reasoning, and by the way, critical reasoning out of the 3 subsections on GMAT verbal is probably the most challenging subsection out there. In my opinion, reading comprehension is the easiest subsection once you get the key to to async reading comprehension, async it becomes really fast. Then it's sentence correction, and the last is critical reasoning. Why? Because it's the only subsection in which you have to think outside of the information that's given to you. Now, having said that, it's very, very manageable. It's not rocket science. Those who want to ace critical reasoning do it very, very quickly. Why? Because it doesn't have a ton of concepts. The first core skill you've got to build to get to that 90th percentile in critical reasoning is build that ability to visualize. When you're reading a statement, don't just read it. Read and imagine that scenario in your mind. Do that especially on the conclusion as well as the answer choices. I tell these people, when we say visualize, what it means is translate the conclusion in your own words and imagine that happening in your mind. Do the same thing with answer choices. Some people think it's going to take time, and initially it does, but it becomes becomes second nature very quickly, and you save a ton of time doing this. The second thing is understanding how the author arrived at the conclusion. That's really important, which is what we call as a logical structure. Again, people look at this and really just read statements that don't build that logical structure. I want to make sure that you guys do build that logical structure. Spend time on the argument rather than rushing through the argument over there. Understand how does the author make the conclusion reasonable. And the last piece, which is kind of what we're going to talk about this, is have a methodical approach to formulating the falsification question in the context of assumptions. So pre-thinking is about this, but it requires that you do this and this properly if you were to formulate that falsification question also. Okay, so with that, let's kind of understand what an assumption is, because a lot of people think they know what an assumption is, but they don't have that precise definition. So we're going to start with a very simple example, an example that's very close to your heart, an example or a context in which you should be able to get the assumption right away, and then we're going to build upon that example to talk about what an assumption is. So here's an argument for you. I want you to tell me, what does the author assume here? So here's the argument: Joe scored 500 on the GMAT, therefore he will not get admission in an Ivy League college. So what does the author assume over here? If you can write it down, what does the author assume here? And I'm going to remove broadcast results so that once I get about 25 responses, I'm going to show broadcast results, but your responses are coming to me. So, so what is the assumption? Please do not put your responses in the Q&A pod. Put it on the short answer pod on the right-hand side, not below the presentation. Okay, I have about 35 responses, actually even more than that. I'm going to broadcast results. And you can see there's some really, really good responses over here. Most of you are saying to get into an Ivy League, you need to score higher. Ivy Leagues require that score. Okay. Some of you are actually even saying GMAT's the only criteria. We're going to really talk about that as well. Some of you are saying 500 is a low score over here. So most of you kind of get it. And this is kind of the power of visualization. I said this is a context that's very familiar to you. You probably think about this context day in and day out. Hence, visualizations come very easily to you. And because visualization came very easily to you, so did the core of assumptions. You've gotten the crux of assumption over here. So let's see what's going on here. Joe got a certain score, which is a numerical value, a score of 500 on the GMAT. And then from there, the author stated that fact. You're not going to dispute that. And then he says, hey, based on this, the author made a prediction. He said, Joe is not going to get admission in an Ivy League college. And so while making that prediction, he made a jump. And what is the jump in logic that he made? The jump in logic that he made is that a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe, and this is probably the piece which I think is important that many of you missed, is unacceptable to Ivy League colleges. Most of you did everything else barring this piece. And this piece is, I think, important for you to understand. Why is it that we talk about someone like Joe? Because in his conclusion, the author is saying that Joe will not get admission into an Ivy League college. The author is not saying that the Prince of Saudi Arabia will not get admission into an Ivy League college. He's saying Joe will not. So hence, to safeguard ourselves, we really put this someone like Joe in my assumption over here. But other than that, you guys got the logic right. And this is what I say is the power of understanding the context or visualizing everything. Okay. So with that, can you guys tell me what is an assumption? What is that core definition of an assumption? Can you tell me? What is an assumption? Okay, let's get about 15 responses, then I'm going to broadcast results. About 20, okay, 3, 2, and 1. Okay. For those of you who've joined again, do not put your responses in the Q&A pod, put it in the short answer pod, which is on the right-hand side. Something that makes the conclusion to be true is essentially a strengthener and not stated in the argument explicitly. Logic that establishes the conclusion to draw the basis after reading the argument. A conclusion based on the jump in the conclusion. Oh, wow, that's a convoluted statement. Unsaid truth in author's perspective. Okay, so when I look at these definitions, there's some of them which are very, very precise. They're right on the money. And there's some that are not precise at all, which actually is the definition of not what an assumption is, but an unstated premise. Every assumption, and I want you to read, I want you to listen to this carefully. Every assumption is an unstated premise. Every unstated premise is not an assumption. What is an unstated premise? It's a statement which provides new information that makes the conclusion more believable. Or in other words, an unstated premise is nothing but a strengthener. But every strengthener is not an assumption. In fact, the confusing answer choice in an assumption question is the strengthener, is that unstated premise answer choice. So what is an assumption? An assumption is an unstated idea that satisfies a very special condition, which is that must be true condition for the conclusion to be valid. Okay, and again, I understand that unstated premise versus the must be true piece can be a bit confusing. So to draw a parallel, I have this visual for you. Actually, let's just do this. So there are two characteristics that an assumption satisfies. One is it provides new information. The second is it satisfies this must be true condition, which is there. And we're going to talk about what does this mean, because once you understand this, what that must be true condition is, and once you build that ability to visualize, you can pretty much answer every assumption question. Okay, so think of this house as an argument, and where this roof over here, okay, is your conclusion. Now, in this house, you see three supporting pillars over there. So each of these pillars is a premise. Okay. Now, each one of these three pillars, they keep the roof upright. They keep the roof strong. But each one of them is not essential to the roof staying upright. So maybe only the middle pillar is an essential pillar, which, if you remove this middle pillar, the roof will cave in. And that essential pillar is your assumption. Each one of these other supporting pillars, they make the roof strong, but they are not essential pillars, and they are your strengtheners. Okay, so that must be true piece, and I'm going to talk about what that must be true is. I'm going to describe that because that's the core of understanding what an assumption is that must be true pillar, that essential pillar is an assumption. Okay. Now think about a house again, and this parallel, this analogy is very powerful because it applies across. Think about your house and tell me, in your house, can there be more than one essential pillar? Can your roof cave in multiple places? Yes, no? You can type that answer in. Can there be more than one essential pillar? Yes. So yes, there can be. If you have a big roof, yes, there can be more than one essential pillar. And similarly, in an argument, there can be more than one assumptions. If the argument is making a claim which is far off from the facts that the claim is based on. So if the author provides very little information but makes a really broad claim, then you can have multiple assumptions in there. But each one of them is going to be satisfy that must be true condition. Okay, that's something that I want to say. So an argument can have multiple assumptions. In your answer choices, there will always be just one of those essential assumptions or one of those valid assumptions. Okay, remember this. The official questions that they're designed very, very carefully. You will only have one of the multiple assumptions if your argument allows for multiple assumptions. And about 45% of the arguments in GMAT CR, they allow for multiple assumptions. Okay. So what does must be true mean? What it means is that if the information provided by the assumption is not true, then the conclusion can no longer true. Or for those of you who have a mindset to destroy things, and that's a good mindset, by the way. It's not I have a mindset to destroy things. In other words, what you can really say is that the assumption needs to be there or must be true for the conclusion to not be destroyed or for that roof to stay upright. Okay, so let's kind of understand and put this in the context of this very simple argument that we did, and understanding this basic concept is really important, because as we tackle 700 plus questions, and we will tackle about 700 plus questions, this is the only thing that you would need to know. Everything else is going to be simple English. Okay, so what does falsification of conclusion mean? So let's kind of take the same argument. In what scenario will the conclusion be falsified here? How will the conclusion be falsified? How will the conclusion be falsified? In what scenario? How will the roof cave down? If Joe gets an admission with a 500 score, yes. If he gets admission, the conclusion is falsified if Joe gets admission with a score of 500. Can everyone see? Does everyone agree? If Joe gets admission, right? This conclusion is broken. You can tell the author, hey, you are wrong, right? So how do we figure out whether an answer choice is correct? Let's look at this. This is something that we came up with. Let's see how we do, how we satisfy the must be true condition. The option says a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is unacceptable to Ivy League colleges. So the question that we ask is, will Joe get admission, or will the conclusion break down if the statement to the left is no longer true? So if this statement is no longer true, will my conclusion break down? Now here is a concept that you need to know, and I'm going to prove this to you in about 2 minutes, that if you say this statement is not true, what you're automatically saying is that its negated version is true. Which means if you say this statement is not true, what you're saying is this statement is true, that a score of 500 on the GMAT for someone like Joe is acceptable to Ivy League schools. So if that happens, does the conclusion break down, which means does Joe get admission? Absolutely, yes, because if the score of 500 becomes acceptable, then the author cannot be 100% certain that Joe will not get admission to an Ivy League college. This is what we call as applying the negation test, or in other words, the must be true test. So this is your must be true criteria. Okay. Now, some of you may be thinking, how is it that you can really say that if a statement is not true, automatically its negated version becomes true? So let's kind of look at this over here, and let's take a few examples. If you say Harvard has the best MBA program, and if you say that part is not true, are you not automatically saying that Harvard does not have the best MBA program, or that an MBA program which is just as good as Harvard or better than Harvard exists? Are you not saying that? If you say this is not true, by default, are you not saying this? Yes, no? Yes. So when you say a statement is not true, by default, you're also saying that its negated version is true. Let's take another example. John runs faster than David. If you say that's not true, by default, you're also saying that John does not run faster than David, or David is just as fast or faster than John. Okay. Um, there was a comment which says a statement can have multiple negations. Actually, no, a statement cannot, and that's kind of where visualizing the statement is really important. So we've actually written an article on how to negate statements, and it's probably the most comprehensive work on negation that's available anywhere. Let me see if I can share a link to that. Let's see. Yes. So if you look at the last link number 5, which is negation tutorial, I think if you launch that, you should be able to get to that. Yes, you should be able to get to a blog post, what and how to negate. Um, it's a it's a fairly long blog post. You can bookmark it with some examples over there. Okay. And these are the other lessons that are there on as a part of the e-GMAT free trial for critical reasoning. Okay. So far so good. We understand what are we getting a better understanding of what must be true means? Are we getting a better understanding of what must be true? Okay, perfect. And then I'll continue to share those links, and they're a part of the e-GMAT free trial too. So just if you log into the free trial. Okay. Now, why does this must be true come? Why? Because from that core definition of assumption, that what is an assumption? An unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to be valid. Now, one thing I want you to do at this point is I want you to write this down on a piece of paper. Spend that time to write this down. Spend that 60 seconds, those 60 seconds to write it down. Why? Because it will help you. We will refer to this definition probably 5 times in this webinar, and we'll refer to this another 20 times when you solve questions. So select yes once you've written it down on a piece of paper or typed it out. But I want you to type it out. Why? Because the very act of typing it out imprints this in our brain. I want 50 people to say yes, they have it written down, or they have typed it out or so, and then I'm going to move forward. Three, 2, and 1. All right, 64 people. Great. Over there. So must be true also cuts the other way, which means that if an answer choice is not must be true, which means if it's an incorrect answer choice, then the conclusion will not break down in the presence of the negated instance of that answer choice. So same argument, let's take an example. If we tell you a statement which is hey, a score of 500 on the GMAT is not a good score, and we have to ask ourselves, is this a must be true answer choice? So we follow the same process, and which is score of 500 on the GMAT is not a good score. We ask ourselves, is this must be true? Or in other words, what this translates to is, will the conclusion become invalid, or will Joe get admission if this statement is no longer true? So if we say this statement is no longer true, its negated instances, a score of 500 on the GMAT is a good score. And if that happens, then does Joe get admission? Actually, no, Joe does not get admission. Why? Because when you think about this argument over here, this conclusion is not predicated on the fact that whether that score is considered to be a good or a bad score. The author simply is saying Joe scored 500, which is a numerical value, therefore he will not get admission on an Ivy League college. There is no qualification of that score of 500. In other words, you can replace that score of 500 by 700 and the argument would still remain the same or so. Okay. Now, can you see how the must be true test allows you to reject an incorrect answer choice? Okay. Vishaka says, how much time should I spend on one CR question? Vishaka, you're asking the wrong question at this time. You're learning. While you're learning, spend 5 minutes. And as you start to spend 5 minutes, you're going to recognize you won't need more than 2 minutes. Okay. Can I explain this again? Yes, I will explain this again. So will Joe get admission in an Ivy League college if a score of 500 on the GMAT is considered a good score? Given this argument over here, will Joe get admission in an Ivy League college? No, he will not. Why? Because the author is not saying that the reason why Joe is not getting admission is because that score of 500 is a bad score. The author is simply saying Joe scored 500, therefore he will not get admission in an Ivy League college. Okay, so even in the presence of the negated instance of a statement, the conclusion doesn't break down, which means this does not satisfy the must be true test. Okay? And that's kind of the definition of must be true. Again, this is where a lot of people don't understand this. And we're going to take this one notch up over here. Okay. So let's kind of look at this over here. Does this satisfy the must be true test? I'm going to put in a yes no poll over here. And this is a more sophisticated answer choice. This is an example of the kind of answer choice you're going to see in difficult questions. The only thing is this is in the context of a very simple argument over here. So the question that I have is this answer choice a correct assumption? If you think it's a correct assumption, select yes. If you think it's an incorrect assumption, select no. Do you think this is a correct assumption? If you think it's a correct assumption, select yes. If you think it's an incorrect assumption, select no. 3, 2, and 1. And again, think about it this way. You are here, about 230 students over here. This is a very low risk environment. Making a mistake over here actually helps you learn. If you choose an answer correctly for the correct reasons, it validates that your understanding is correct. So the worst thing you can do is not participate over here. Everything else is going to be beneficial for you. So if you're taking the time out, participate. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results, and about 24% of you think this is a correct assumption and you would be wrong. The majority, or 3/4 of you, are correct. This is not a correct assumption, and let's see why that is the case. So we asked the same question. This is where you see the process remains the same. It's the application of process that where you falter. The choice says the quality of an applicant's essay does not play a significant role in deciding whether he gets into an Ivy League college. If you translate this answer choice, the first step is translate that answer choice and to simplify this. So it says, hey, essays are not important. Okay. So the question that you ask is, hey, will Joe get admission if this statement is no longer true? So which means, what is it? The negated version of this, the quality of applicants' essays does play a significant role. So which means if essays become important. So this one is saying, what happens if essays become important? So does Joe get admission? No, not really. Why? Because if, let's say, you need a score of 750 and then you need great essays, and if Joe scores 500, if he doesn't satisfy one of the two criteria, he would still not get admission. So because Joe will not get admission, it still doesn't satisfy the must be true criteria. Okay. Most of you get it. There's still about 10% of you, based on what I'm seeing as a reaction, who won't get it. We're going to solve another question in about 20 minutes, which uses the exact same logic. And for those of you who haven't gotten it, you will get it then. And for those of you who've gotten it, you will see the same logic being used in a more sophisticated argument. And you will then see, if you understand this well, how solving that question becomes a lot easier. So Vishank says, if there was a choice, says GMAT plays the most significant role. No. Think about it this way. Do you remember? Let me just go over here. Do you remember that roof analogy that I talked about? Essential pillar and roof. Let me just go over here. Do you remember that roof analogy? Essential pillar and roof? right? Now, this is very similar to the essays and the GMAT being two essential pillars. What happens if you have the essays, but you remove the GMAT? What happens to the roof? If you have the essays, but you remove the GMAT, what happens to your roof? If you remove one of those two essential pillars, it will fall, yes. Which means, will Joe get admission? No. Which means, does my conclusion break down? No. Then is it must be true? No. Okay, and that's the power of process. Whether the negated approach is the only approach? No, we've not talked about the approach to crack these questions. We're just talking about foundation. We're going to come to approach right now. We've not talked about pre-thinking. Okay. And again, for those of you who are saying this is sophisticated, this is sophisticated logic, which is why we kind of have some pre-lessons over there. This is a very, very application-focused webinar. So you will get, if you're not getting it now, you will get it in 2 questions, trust me, because this is the same logic that will be repeated in different contexts. So the skills, again, remember the 3 skills that we will focus on is visualize the statement, which is the conclusion or the answer choices. The second thing is understand the logic. And the third is formulate the falsification question. Okay. So just to summarize, must be true helps you narrow down. If for the correct answer choice, the conclusion will not hold true or will break down when you negate that answer choice. For the incorrect answer choice, the conclusion will continue to hold true in the presence of the negated version of that answer choice. Okay, so let's kind of learn pre-thinking. All of this was just to tell you what an assumption is. This wasn't pre-thinking, by the way. Now let's talk about what is pre-thinking. And to do that, I'm going to actually go for baptism by fire. I'm going to have you pre-think, and then I'm going to talk about how do you go about doing pre-thinking. Okay, and again, all of your questions will get answered. Aditi says, GMAT familiar topic. How about unfamiliar topics? That's what those topics are coming, Aditi. Okay. For those of you, I think a few of you before I go there, I want to ask you one thing. What kind of internet connection do you have? And the options over here are cable, mobile dongle. Cable internet is something which is, you have a cable coming to your house, which is either a coax or a DSL or essentially a fiber optic coming to your house, and then you're using a Wi-Fi to distribute that. Or you're using a mobile dongle, something that you get from Verizon, Reliance, Airtel, T-Mobile, or one of those, or you're tethering using a cell phone internet. If you are using a mobile dongle, or if you're using a cell phone's internet, you will find that every 20 minutes the audio does go out of sync. Why? Because this session requires very low bandwidth but very high fidelity, which means very low latency internet connection, and mobile technology is not designed to support this kind of connection. So it's not a reliable medium to support low bandwidth, high quality connections also. And again, it might sound very, very odd because the ISP promises you 10 megabits, 20 megabits or so, but it's never high quality. So if it so happens that you find that the audio is out of sync, join again. It resets that mobile connection, and your connection should be fine for another 20-25 minutes or so. And again, I apologize. It's just the connection that you're using. It's not designed for high quality. And again, for us, we like to get a lot of feedback from you, which is why we don't use YouTube or some of those other platforms overall. Can we do these types of meetings on Zoom or Meet? It's the same thing. You take remember those ones are not real time. You would not be able to do real time back and forth the way we are doing over here. If you start typing your answers in real time, you'll have the same issues. All of these connections are buffered connections. Even though that buffering is just about 50 to 100 milliseconds, it does make a huge difference when you have 200 people participating. So yeah, I mean, that's one of the reasons why we don't like to use Zoom. This platform, Adobe Connect, is about 10 times as expensive as a Zoom is. We use Zoom internally within e-GMAT. This is designed by Adobe. This one is not ours, but it's used by pretty much all universities, or a version of it is used by pretty much all top universities, because it's designed for learning. I mean, you could really see the different kinds of polls that came in fairly easily. And if you have a proper connection, you would love this platform. Okay, but yes, if for every non-learning use, we use Zoom and other pieces. For example, if you were to work with our GMAT strategy consultant, you would use Zoom. That's the other platform that we use. Okay, so let's get into our pre-thinking exercise. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to give you an argument. It's going to be a bit more sophisticated, and I'm going to give you 3 minutes to pre-think. So there will be no answer choices. All you have to do is tell me, what does the author assume over here? So I'm going to clear those polls, and thank you for that feedback. We truly appreciate that. Let's go forward. Now, the process that we're going to follow is I'm going to give you the argument, and it says 2 minutes. I'm going to give you 3 minutes. So don't worry about timing. So you're going to put in your pre-thinking. We're going to look at this. Then we're going to look at how I pre-think, and then we're going to evaluate a couple of submissions or so. So one thing is, get a bottle of water, get your pen and paper. I'm going to count down to about 15 seconds or so that you're ready, and then I'm going to show that argument. 3, 2, and 1. Here is the argument. You guys have 3 minutes from now. I'm going to mute myself during All right, guys, last 25 seconds. Get those answers in. 5. Okay, you see the 3-minute alarm on my watch. 4, 3, 2, and 1. Why is it that you guys are keeping all these answers to yourself? The moment I gave that 20-second warning, I got all of these answers. And some very, very interesting answers. So when you see this argument, there's a lot more information here. And just the variety of answers that I see over here, it just shows how when you have more information, that information tends to confuse you, and when it does confuse you, it leads to many of the answers that I see over here. And what I'm gonna try and attempt to do through the pre-thinking process is structure the information that the argument provides. When you structure the information, what you're going to find is understanding the conclusion and pre-thinking or thinking about what an assumption should do becomes very, very easy. And when you do that, solving a question becomes very easy. Okay, so overall, when I look at this, I see about 10% good answers that I see over here, and the other 90% are not perfect, but out of those 90%, about another 15 to 20% are around the right things, so they can be improved, but 70% are talking about stuff that is not relevant to what an assumption should do. And you're going to see this by yourself because I have just so many answers. I'm going to just move this away. So let's kind of look at this over here. The process that we're going to follow is we're going to first understand what the conclusion is saying. We're going to isolate which statement is the conclusion, and we're going to understand what it's saying. Then we're going to look at what's the reasoning that the author is using. We're not going to worry about what an assumption is, but or what the assumption in the context of this argument is. But first, we're going to figure out how is that conclusion arrived at? What is the reasoning? And then we're going to ask a pre-thinking question. And when we ask that pre-thinking question, that's when we will have assumptions given to us. Okay. Now, what's the logic behind this pre-thinking question? The logic behind this pre-thinking question is kind of comes from that definition of an assumption. An assumption is that unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to be valid, which means it's like that essential pillar. Which means that without the assumption, this conclusion will break down, which means that an assumption is built around the scenarios where the conclusion breaks down. Think about that essential pillar analogy again and see, okay, if you were building a house and you were to put in pillars that are essential pillars, where would you put them? You would see where the roof is caving in, and you would put pillars over there so that you prevent the roof from caving in. In the same way, to figure out where the assumptions would be, you first figure out where does the conclusion break down, and essentially put the assumption over there. Okay, does that make sense? Let's figure out where the conclusion breaks down, and then that's kind of where my assumptions are going to be, right? So that's kind of what it is. So to figure out which what an assumption is, let's kind of figure out where does the conclusion break down. That's all that you have to do. So the pre-thinking question that we're going to ask is, under what circumstances, given the logic of the argument or given the facts in the argument, will my conclusion break down? If we ask this question, the answer to these questions will tell us how to build assumptions, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate in this question and in the questions post this one. Okay, so here is our argument. The first step is to identify the main conclusion. And I want you to tell me which statement is the main conclusion. And in the poll that I'm going to share with you, it has 4 statements. I use it for another question. Don't worry about statement 4. Just worry about statements 1, 2, and 3 and tell me, according to you, which statement is the main conclusion. Which statement is the main conclusion according to you? Don't do statement 4. Statement 4 doesn't exist here. Out of statements 1, 2, and 3. 3. I want to see at least 100 responses, guys. I have close to 100 responses, or upwards of 110 responses. That's great. Which statement is the main conclusion? 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. Now, one thing I want to tell you is that the main conclusion is always by the author of the argument. That's one thing. The second thing is the main conclusion is what the author wants you to believe. It's a central idea of the argument. It's what the author wants you to take away. Okay. So with that, let me broadcast the results. But 35% or 49 of you say that statement 1 is the main conclusion, and you guys would be wrong. Statement 1 is not the main conclusion. Why? Because and a lot of people think statement 1 is the main conclusion. Why? Because it has this word concludes over here, and it says a recently published paper concludes something. Okay. And again, this is not by the main author, or it's not by the author of the argument, it's by the paper. And because people see this word concludes, they see this must be the main conclusion. No, this is not. The correct answer is statement 2, which about 44% of you have chosen. Statement 2 is the main conclusion. This is what the author wants you to believe from this argument. He says the reason why professors don't do such a great job is because of the reward system that they have over here. Okay. And statement 3, the reason why statement 3 is over here is to make this statement 2 more believable. So statement 2 is a premise or a supporting statement for my main conclusion. So statement 3 is written to make statement 2 more believable. Hence, it cannot be the main conclusion. Why? Because this is what the author wants you to get out of it. And you can see as you do this exercise, it really starts to expose gaps in your understanding. If you can't figure out which statement is the main conclusion, you won't be able to pre-think. That's kind of just the fundamental step in any argument-based question. Let's identify the main conclusion. Now let's visualize. We've identified what the main conclusion is. Let's visualize this main conclusion. And I'm going to read this. Clearly, the difference between professors in the tenure system and other full-time lecturers has to do with the reward system for the former. Okay. Now, what this statement is saying is, first of all, the author, remember we had these results from the published paper. The author is not refuting those results. He says, the results are good. Professors actually contribute less to student learnings than full-time lecturers do. But what the author is doing in this statement is he's really defining why is it that professors contribute less, and he says the reason why they contribute less is because of their reward system. Okay. Can everyone see this? Kritagya says, can you explain why statement 3 is incorrect? Yes, I can. Let me just go back over here. Kritagya, can you write down what is the definition of the main conclusion? What is the definition of the main conclusion? Can you write it down over here? And everyone else can write it down as well. What is the definition of the main conclusion? Now, what is the definition? What is it that the author wants you to believe? Okay. What is the author trying to convey, or what does the author want you to believe? Or what does the author want to prove? All of these are valid statements. What does the author want to prove? Okay. So in this argument, what the author wants to prove is this part over here, that the reward system is causing the difference. Okay. What this statement is a data point, which you're not going to question, to make what statement 3 is a data point to make statement 2 more believable. Should we do the ABC test? Yes, you should do the ABC test if you need to, and we teach you how to do the ABC test. An ABC test is B written because of C, or is C written to support B. In this case, C is written to support B, which makes B the main conclusion. Okay, if you're an e-GMAT student, you know what the ABC test is. It's in the premise and conclusion files over there. Okay, so that's why statement 3 is not. But good question, in context question, good question. All right, so let's visualize the conclusion. What the author is trying to say is the reason why professors don't do such a great job, or as great a job as full-time lecturers, is because of the reward system for professors. Okay, so again, the key thing over here is, as an author, I am not disputing the report's finding. I'm just blaming the reward system for it. That's the claim that he's making. Now, this piece over here, this word greater, what does this word greater compare? Can you tell me? What does this word greater compare? And for whom? For whom? I'm going to actually put in another poll question, and this is very, very interesting over here. So whose reward system does statement 3 talk about? Is it just tenured faculty, just lecturers, both tenured faculty and lecturers? Whose reward system does statement 3 talk about? Just tenured faculty, just lecturers, or both tenured faculty and lecturers? Three, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results. 70% of you say just tenured faculty, and you'd be correct. But you can also see 29% of you are saying both tenured faculty and lecturers, and you will be wrong over there. And again, I want you to read this again. The criteria for rewarding whom? Tenured faculty typically places a greater emphasis on research than on teaching. So what it's saying is, for tenured faculty, for let's call them TF, and forgive my handwriting is really bad. There's about 60% emphasis on research and 40% on teaching. Hypothetical numbers again. So why? Because it's a greater emphasis on research and less on teaching. Okay, that's what this statement is saying. Or 70% on research, or 30% on teaching, or 55% on research and 45% on teaching. Is that clear to those 30% over here? Is that clear? Okay. We don't know anything about the reward system for full-time lecturers over there. Okay. So this is what we call as, when we develop this level of understanding, this is what we call as building that logical structure, visualizing the conclusion and building that logical structure. Okay, here's a logical structure. Statement 3 is your main conclusion. Statement 1 is the context. It sets the stage. This data point is why the author looks at this data point and arrives at the main conclusion. And this statement is my supporting statement. Okay. So with that, let's ask the pre-thinking question. It says, under what circumstances, given the facts and the argument, will my conclusion break down? Okay. And when you translate that pre-thinking question into the information that this argument says, my conclusion breakdown means that the reward system is not responsible. So the way you'd say is, under what circumstances would the reward system not be responsible? Or under what circumstances can I not blame the reward system for the difference in performance, given that I know that full-time lecturers do a better job, and I know that reward system for professors places more emphasis on research, that's 60% emphasis on research and 40% emphasis on teaching. That's my falsification question that I'm going to ask. Okay. So again, the same question, under what circumstances can I not blame the reward system for that difference, given that there's a greater emphasis on research? There are two possible scenarios. One is, if lecturers have the same reward system, okay, then in that case, then I can't blame the reward system. If non-tenured faculty and tenured faculty has the same reward system, then I can't blame the reward system. Look at statement 1. Does that make sense to you? If both entities have the same reward system, then I can't blame the reward system, right? Then my conclusion will break down. Okay. If, let's say, you ask tenured faculty and they say, we don't act as per the reward system doesn't matter to us. If a majority of that tenured faculty doesn't act as per the reward system, then also you can't blame the reward system, right? They may have a reward system, but if their actions are not governed by it. In both these scenarios, what happens to my conclusion? What happens to my conclusion in both these scenarios? It breaks down. It is destroyed. Right? So if these are the scenarios in which my conclusion breaks down, this is where my roof is caving in. Okay. Then what are my assumptions? Non-tenured professors do not have an identical reward system. Most tenured professors care about the reward system. Can you see how we figured out where the conclusion breaks down and how we translated these into these statements over here? Does it have to be most tenured professors? Yes, it has to be most. And again, I'm not going to go into why it has to be most. Go through the negation example, negation article, and you will get to know. Can we have an assumption that non-tenured professors have the skills to teach which tenured professors don't have? Is that a must be true? Is that required? No. In the same way, there are some very, very confusing statements that I can bring and I can put that test, but I don't want to because this is a class which has a varying level of skills. And so I don't want to get in there because I'll lose half the class over here. How do we get these two assumptions? There can be more assumptions, but these are two assumptions that come. The thing that I want to make sure that you understand is you pose this question, you understand the argument, and these assumptions will at these things. Vishaka has a statement. It says, why can't we have below as an assumption? People good at research are also good at teaching, which is useful to enhance. Is the conclusion that professors are not good at teaching? Or is the conclusion that professors are not delivering the benefit to students? What is the conclusion? Not good at or not delivering the benefit, Vishaka? You're coming up with really great points, right? And this is where, yes, they're not delivering. And so the very fact, so Vishaka, I don't want you to feel bad at asking this question because it's a great question that you've asked. You're going to that next level, which I don't want to go in this because this is a very generic session. But if I were to do a session just for my students who've gone through the first 3 files in the assumption course, I would delve into all of these things over here. There are certain things that I won't do over here because they require a level of understanding that a few of you possess. And if you're an e-GMAT student, if you have those doubts, ask them in our internal forums and we will do those. Okay. But the thing that I want to make sure is, can you see how when you ask this question, the scenarios start to come up? And there was another really great question which was there that someone said that, hey, this is a bit more difficult for me to think. Yes, it may be. And that's the beauty of pre-thinking, that, hey, you may do pre-thinking. You may be able to come up with one assumption. Remember, what is the definition of pre-thinking? I want to be able to come up with how many assumptions? How many? One, not all. Just one. Why? Because if you come up with one assumption, what it proves is you understand the logic that the author is using. You understand a way in which I can falsify the conclusion. If you do that and you see an answer choice that talks about something else, which also breaks the conclusion down, you'd be able to really identify it once you see that in the answer choice. Okay, only one, not at least one, only one. I care about only one when you are in that exam mode. Of course, when you're in the learning mode, you can spend more time. But in the exam mode, the moment you have one, just move forward, go to the answer choices. Okay. And the beauty of this is, with the approach to pre-thinking, as you solve more questions, as you see those high quality solutions that we provide, where we tell you all the assumptions, it builds that ability. You can really say, oh, I missed this scenario during my pre-thinking, and now I can see how that scenario also fits. And, with every question you solve, even those you get right, you actually become a more broad thinker. Someone asked this question early on. Why is it that, how do I deal with arguments where I'm not as familiar with the context? That's how you deal with arguments. Abhishek says, isn't it kind of indicated in the premise that tenured faculty are rewarded more for research? Remember, Abhishek, I asked this question.
That statement 3, does it tell me anything about lecturers? No, it doesn't. What it told was that there's 60% emphasis on research and 40% on teaching. Okay. What if your pre-thinking assumption doesn't come in the options? Okay. What did I say? What is pre-thinking not? What is not the job of pre-thinking? Does anyone remember from early on in the argument? What am I not trying to do? I'm not trying to predict the answer. Not trying to predict. There is a chance it will not be there. But because you've been able to do pre-thinking, you will be able to select another option which satisfies the must be true condition. Okay? You're not trying to predict the answer. Okay. Now, how many of you are concerned about timing? I'm going to just put in this piece over here. Very concerned about timing. Actually, let me just ask this over here. I should have asked this question. I'm going to put in a yes-no poll because I also want to see people who are not concerned about timing. Here's a yes-no poll. How many of you are concerned? Select yes or select no if you're concerned, if you're not concerned. Okay, I'm going to actually remove broadcast. Well, the broadcast results is there. But 93% of you are concerned about this. And trust me, and why is it that you guys are concerned about timing? Let me guess. Why is it that you guys are concerned about timing? Tell me. Because A, some of you've actually felt short. Who says GMAT is timing? Who says GMAT is timing? I'll tell you the 3 reasons why people are concerned. Okay, one is they hear from people that acing the GMAT is about doing things fast. Okay, the second is some people have taken the test, have gotten a low score, and they've not been able to attempt the last few questions. Okay, those are kind of 2 reasons. And the third is some people get stuck in some questions, and because of which they mess up their test. Am I correct? It's one of those 3 reasons. One is you probably attended another test prep company's webinar, and they say timing, and I'm going to teach you tricks. Okay. The second is you've gotten a low score, and you've not been able to answer 2 or 3 questions. Okay. And the third is you've gotten stuck on some questions. Now, I'm going to just diffuse each one of these. I'm going to show you some stats over there. For those of you, and this is some ways, because first of all, do you see any tricks being taught in this webinar so far? Any tricks? Have you seen any tricks being? No, it's pure method, right? There's no statistical piece that's being taught. It's pure methods over there. I'm going to share a statistic with you, something that you can verify and something that you should verify, because this is really important if you want to, if you love your GMAT. So a lot of you know that e-GMAT has 2,000 reviews, and a lot of people really just say, hey man, how can someone have? So let's worry about the fact that we have 2,000 reviews over the last 10 years. Let's worry about just 2021. And if you go to GMAT Club's review section, and the reason why I like GMAT Club's review section is because every review over there is validated using a score report, which is the same score report that you send to B schools. Okay, if you do a statistical analysis, this is what you're going to find in terms of this is CV's crack verbal, and I should not bash their they have a really good name. So if you look at reviews over there, and this is data from January till about end of April, you're going to find that there are about 14 partners, but there are only 3 partners that have delivered 10 or more reviews on GMAT Club in 2021. Everyone else is inconsequential when it comes to count of reviews. And this is important. Why? Because each one of us has the same right to ask our students to post reviews. I mean, GMAT Club is not going to say no if 500 of e-GMATers go and post reviews, as long as they can provide a valid score report that really says, hey, I scored a 710, 720. Here is an actual score report link from MBA.com. Okay. And because of that, people don't. In fact, and that's kind of where that's there. So when we talk about no tricks and I say timing, I want you to keep this in context with regards to the results that we've delivered. And if you actually look at just verbal results, we've delivered about 85%. TTP, a majority of those results are quant results. Okay. So keep this in context over there. Why? Because you will hear 10 experts say things, ask them what results have they delivered. And this is how you're going to feel as you go through this. Let's say you are this guy over here, someone who doesn't do pre-thinking today. The moment you start doing pre-thinking, two things will happen. So point one is your accuracy is at this point low over here. Your timing is at this point over here. The moment you start doing pre-thinking, your time to answer questions will go up and your accuracy will go up, and you'll be like this guy who's going to say, hey, why the hell am I doing pre-thinking? I'm already stressed about timing, and then this is making me take longer to solve questions. At that point, continue trusting pre-thinking. As you do that, as you focus on the process, two things will happen. Your accuracy will continue to go up. You'll actually continue to solve more difficult questions with much higher confidence. You know that the answer that you're choosing is correct, and your time to answer questions will come down. Okay. And that's when you'd say, okay, now I understand why I did pre-thinking. Once you get to step 3, there's no stopping you. And that's when you do this. Okay. So going from 1 to 3 takes deliberate effort. That's why it's hard. That's why 730 is a 95th percentile or so. Only 5% of the students get there. Okay. How many questions do you need to reach to solve level 3? If you're diligent, you're going to need about 20 questions. If you're not diligent, you'll waste 100 questions and not get there. And being diligent means spending 20-25 minutes on every question, making sure you learn how to visualize the conclusion, making sure you follow the pre-thinking process, patting yourself on the back if you're able to come up with 2 assumptions, and kicking yourself if there's something in the solution that you can't come up with. You do that, 15-20 questions, you'll be there. Okay. So here is something that one, and you see this, if you go read debriefs on GMAT, you'll really see. If you go read reviews on GMAT, you're going to see very, very similar notion attained. In fact, if you go read, watch the debriefs, how many of you over here are subscribed to our YouTube channel? Let me just ask a yes/no poll over here. Clear. How many of you have subscribed to our YouTube channel? Okay. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel. You will see about 160 unedited video interviews. These are 30-40 minute long interviews where people talk about their GMAT journeys. One of the other things that you're going to really ask is, and this is the first link over here. One of the other things you're going to really notice is we have 160, others don't have it. And if you ask others, why is it that you don't have success stories, unedited success stories on their YouTube channel, they'll say, hey, students don't give that. Our students are so passionate that they continue to come back to our platform. And I mean, this Thursday, I had a student from 2014 who talked about how do you get into McKinsey. This guy, he didn't talk about his GMAT. He talked about how do you get into McKinsey. Why? Because he benefited a lot, and he said this is my time to give back. Over the last 4 months, even though we don't offer any MBA services, we've been hosting 2 webinars a week on how do you go from that high GMAT score to that B school admission, and how do you get those scholarships, and how we've been able to do that because our former students are passionate about it. So you can just subscribe to it and you can watch these, and you will see people talk about these things over here. So here is this guy. It says, understand the passage completely. Take your time. Equally important, pre-think an answer before looking at an answer choice. Probably this one word will have the most impact on your GMAT. This is pre-thinking in CR as well as in RC. As one of our former students, you actually saw his story was on YouTube as well. He says, answer CR questions as if there is no answer choices. Pre-thinking is a game changer. When it gets to 700 plus level questions, you have to do pre-thinking. Why? Because otherwise you're going to choose all sorts of wrong answers. Okay. There's another guy who actually, I think he scored a V44 or so, if I remember. He says, pre-thinking primes the mind. We're constantly on our toes while reading a paragraph or a CR question stem. Apart from comprehending the passage, we keep speculating how, in which direction the passage will orient. This is more about an RC passage or what logical jump has the author taken, which is more about the CR piece. This guy moved from a 520 to a 740. Okay. So with that, we're going to do now official questions, 3 very, very difficult official questions. And we're going to do this one question, and then we're going to do 2 questions as a quiz. Okay. Here is a question. I'm going to give you again 3 minutes to answer this question over here. And here is the question. Good luck, guys. 3 minutes. Hey guys, get those answers in. 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll. I'm going to broadcast the results, and you guys can see, about 39% of you chose choice E. Choice B was very popular, as was choice C. And this is one question where the argument seems very, very simple, and it truly is very simple. But when you look at the answer choices, they seem very confusing. And if you don't do pre-thinking, this is a question that will mess you up. This is also a question which, by the way, tells you the value of that must be true condition. This is a 700 level question. Any question where the generic accuracy is lower than 50% is a 700 level question. That's the definition of it. And again, I'm sure many of you felt that way, right? Where you say, hey, the argument seems very simple, but when you looked at, if you didn't do pre-thinking, you looked at the answer choices, they were confusing. In fact, even if you did pre-thinking, the answer choices to some of you might still have felt, very confusing. B, C, D, and E, all of them seemed really good. This was a question where you have 4 strengtheners, B, C, D, and E are all good strengtheners. Only one of them is actually an assumption. And we're going to really see that over here. So what's going on over here? So we want to finance road repairs, and the Highway Commission is considering a 50% increase in the toll. And what is the toll right now? It's 10 cents per mile. Okay, so let's kind of look at why you should really look at it. And this is a beautiful question because it clarifies that must be true. It's very similar to that option that we discussed in Joe won't get admission into a B school, where we said application shouldn't be important. It's very similar to that option over here. So we're going to look at this and you're going to understand. So if you faltered on this, congratulations, because you will not falter on this concept once again. If you did not falter but was confused between 2 answer choices, you will not be confused going forward. I'm going to just reduce my volume. Let me know if it's too low. Okay. Choice 2 says the Highway Commissioner claims that the toll will increase by the annual revenue by at least 50% per year. So there's a claim that's made by the Highway Commissioner over here. Okay. So the conclusion in this case is, and we have to build this conclusion somewhat, that the annual revenue will go up by at least 50%. Was everyone able to arrive at this conclusion? That, hey, the revenue should go up by 50%, which means last year the revenue was $1 million. This year it'll be 1.5 million at least. It could be 1.6, 1.7. If it was 10 million last year, it'll be 15 million at least or so. Okay, so that's what we want to do. So how do we estimate annual revenue? Can you guys tell me? How do we estimate annual revenue based on the information in this argument? What's the formula? Okay, miles times cents. Absolutely, yes. Miles times cents. Okay. Annie says right. Anubhav is correct as well. Let's see who else is here. So that's kind of how you estimate. Again, don't look at the answer choices, please. What you're given is that you charge 10 cents per mile, and essentially, which means that the annual revenue is going to be how much I charge per mile into the total number of miles traveled. I want everyone to look at this. Is what you should have done in your pre-thinking. This is how I calculate annual revenue. How do you say number of trips times fee? Where do you see a trip fee over here, and where do you see trips in the argument? Okay, Sneha, do you see trips in the argument? Do you see any trips in the argument itself? No, there's nothing there. Why would you bring trips in there? Pre-thinking is done based on information in the argument, not in the answer choices. Remember what I said. The moment you see an answer choice, throw pre-thinking out of the window. Okay. So what is given in the argument? 10 cents per mile, toll per mile. And what do we need? Total number of toll miles. So what's our pre-thinking question? Under what circumstances would the annual revenue not increase by 50%? Okay, given that we know that this is going to go up by 50%. So what do we know? We know this is already is up by 50%. So this is plus 50. Okay. And in what scenario will the annual revenue not go up? In what scenario will the annual revenue not go up? If miles are less, if the total number of miles go down, that's the only scenario. If miles decrease, you have this over here. The only scenario is if miles decrease. The total number decreases. What is my assumption? The total distance traveled or the total number of miles remains the same. How is this a 700 level question? Someone asks. Because you see the data in front of you. Only 30% of people got it right. Vishaka. Only 30% of people got it right. That's how. It doesn't matter what you think or what I think. What matters is stats. Okay. Forget about the answer choices for a moment. Is this clear to everyone? Forget about the answer choices. I'm going to talk about every answer choice. But is this clear? Distance versus miles, there's no difference. Total number of miles. It translates to one to the other. Yeah. And yes, pre-thinking makes things super simple. Visualization and pre-thinking. Not just pre-thinking, but visualization combined with pre-thinking. Okay. So let's look at choice B. Choice B says, and a lot of you chose choice B. I'm going to actually show you a poll once again so that you guys can see what you chose. Highway miles. Here are my answer choices. You should be able to see what each one of you chose. But 46 of you, 36% of you chose choice B. Choice B. B, C, D, and E, each one of them is a strengthener. Great strengthener. Okay. Now, let's kind of look at this and let's kind of ask, is this must be true? We have to ask is this MBT must be true? The choice says the total number of trips made on the toll highway will not decrease from its current number. Let's visualize this. I'm going to actually bring in a notes pane over here. And the question that we are asking is that must be true? Let's just bring this over here. So let's say last year, 1,000 trips were taken. Okay. This year, because of the toll increase, we do 900 trips. Then am I Am I 100% sure that the total distance will go down? Yes, no? No, I'm not 100% certain that the total distance will go down. Why? What can make up for reduced number of trips? What can make up for reduced number of trips? Longer trips, yes. So, choice B, a great strengthener, would have been a correct answer choice in a strengthened question, is not an assumption. Okay? Everyone who chose choice B, is that clear? You understand what MBT is? Must be true is now? Right? Okay, so not really. Go back to the application files. Choice E, which is my correct answer, is talking about the total distance. The total distance goes down, my revenue will go down. Why? And it won't go by 50%. And which is my correct answer. Doubts on any other answer choice? Let's look at choice C. Some of you chose choice C as well. If the average length goes down, what can make up for average length? If the average length goes down, what can make up? Number of trips can make up, absolutely. Yes. So if this goes down, number of trips can make up. If the number of drivers who constantly avoid the highway tolls increase, what's going to make up? The drivers who still are there can take longer trips or can even take more trips. Yes. Now, you see, once you visualize it, you guys start to answer things by yourself. And that's the beauty of visualization and pre-thinking. It helps you really see through the argument. It helps you become that author, which is what I want you to be. Become so good at it. B plus C combined will be an assumption. Yes. This is so easy. How is this a 700 level question? Because that's how people operate. Remember this. What may be easy to you may not be easy to other people. When we talk about a 700 level question, to some people 700 level questions are super easy. Okay. To others, they are not. We have a verbal expert. Her name is Stacy. She lives, half a mile away from me in Phoenix, Arizona. She is someone who comes from a humanities background, and the 700 level passages that seem slightly difficult to me are a cakewalk for her. Okay. Which is why, I've probably created more questions than anyone else in the GMAT world when it comes to GMAT verbal questions. And when I really create a question and I rate it, my accuracy of rating a question as easy, medium, or hard is about 60%. Okay. Despite the fact that I've created more than 2,000 verbal questions. The very simple reason is I only have my context. And which is why when we create a question, we actually float it out and get about 1,000 responses on it before we rate a question. Because that's the only way to rate a question. How many of you have talked about experimental questions on the GMAT? How many of you have heard that term? Experimental questions on the GMAT. Okay, why do you think they exist? Why do experimental questions exist? To test the difficulty, not to check your level, but to check the question's level. That experimental question plays no role in your score. Okay, but what it does is it checks the question's level to really say if 50% or fewer people get it right, then that's considered a difficult question. Okay, so experimental questions that actually, the questions that are experimental for you may actually end up becoming real questions 2 months down the line. Why? Because it takes 20 to 25 days for a question to get validated or characterized. How many of you over here, e-GMAT students, are on Scholarium 2.0 platform? How many of you? Is there anyone on Scholarium 2.0? Okay. If you've solved, we recently released about 80 new questions. If you solved a few of those questions, you would have seen in the solution screen it says not enough data or question yet to be characterized. That's because, those are kind of the equivalent of experimental questions for us. We are characterizing those questions. It takes us about a week and a half for us to characterize just the volume of students that we have. We get about 300 attempts in about a week or so on any question. So that's something that we do. That's something that the GMAC do. Oh, Scholarium is an e-GMAT product. If you don't know it, then you're not an e-GMAT student. It's the world's most loved assessment engine. Okay. All right. Yeah, we're not doing the study plan today because of COVID. So, okay. But if you're an e-GMAT student, you should have the study plan. You have unlimited access to this tool. And make sure you attend those onboarding sessions. Okay. So with that, let's shift gears. Let's solve more challenging questions. Again, this was a 700 level question. Now we're going to solve 750 level questions. And there is some free material on Scholarium, Paridhi. Okay. So here's how we're going to do. I'm going to give you these questions one after the other. And what you will do is you'll put in your best attempts. And these are difficult questions, probably the most challenging questions you're going to see on the GMAT. And the reason why I have these questions is because I want to demonstrate to you that once you do pre-thinking, you will be able to solve even the most challenging questions fairly easily. It's about building that visualization and then following a process over here. So the way I don't want to time you guys in this. So the way we go about doing this is I want about 50 of you to say not answered. Select not answered when you actually, so when 50 of you choose another answer choice other than not answered, that's when I'm going to call time. So can I get you guys to select not answered? I'm going to reopen the poll. Select not answered. And this is the same thing that we're going to follow in the algebra webinar tomorrow. So we do a lot of that. And here is the question now. Good luck, guys. And I'm going to mute myself during this. All right, guys, last 40 seconds, get those answers in. but 70% of the class is done. Five, four, three. Oh, my timer says you're done. 2 and 1, but 93% of the class is done. That's wonderful. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. You can see this is how you guys did on this particular question. We're going to solve one more question and we're going to discuss both these questions together. So the next one is not going to be as hard. This was a really, really hard question, a particularly hard question or so. And some of the best experts I know of have actually faltered on this question. So again, we're going to follow the same approach. I want you to select not answered. All right, I have 53 people who selected not answered, and I'm going to share the question with you. And I'm going to put this timer, this notes timer over here, which says how many people are done with this. So that way you will know, how many people are done, and you have some idea of timing. Both these questions are 700, 750 levelers. All right, guys, last 15 seconds, almost 80% is done. 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll, broadcast the results, and again, you see choice D over here is a clear winner, and the choice C is really popular, so is choice E, as is choice A. This is an excellent question where visualizing the language is a key part for this particular question. So we're going to solve both these questions now. And again, as I said earlier, it doesn't matter whether you get them right or wrong. What matters is what you learn from them. What matters is how you approach these questions, because if your approach is right, you'd pretty much get these questions right the next time you do this, or similar questions correct the next time you approach them overall. So this one, really confusing question. Let me share your results as well. RDS Technologies. Here are the results. Really difficult question from a stat standpoint overall, and in general also it's a confusing question, not because the logic here is difficult, but because it has a lot of terms, and frankly the context piece is kind of a bit off. So let's kind of look at the conclusion. The conclusion is identifying the conclusion is very simple. The conclusion says the number of Verlanders, let's call them V's, Wordlanders. That's still, I'm going to discuss this question probably 100 times. It's still a tongue twister for me. So let's call them V's. The number of V's receiving special program information probably did not increase significantly during these 2 years. So it's really important, as I said, to visualize this conclusion. The first, and as I visualize this, I want you to observe certain things about this conclusion. One is it's only about V's over here. It's not about people from outside. The second, it's only talking about V's who receive this one kind of information, which is special program information. And the third thing is it's comparing two time periods, 1994 and 1996. So if you visualize this, what it's saying is if 1,000 people received special program information in 1994, then that number in 1996 is probably 1010 or 990. It didn't go up a whole lot, or it stayed more or less the same. If it was 1 million in 1994, it's kind of remained around that million in 1996. Is the visualization piece clear to everyone? That's what we are saying. The number of Verlanders who receive this special program information did not change a whole lot. I think this part should be there. Let's see, why does the author really say this? So this is what the author is trying to prove. In an argument, the main conclusion is always suspect. Okay. So why does the author say that? There are two reasons why he says that. He says a number of RDS equipped radios. Let's go back. The number of RDS equipped radios remained the same in 94 as in 96. So if there were 10,000 radios in 94, there were 10,000 radios in 96. There were 100,000 in 94. There were 100,000 in 96 as well. The other thing which is there is the number of transmitting stations actually went up quite a bit. They actually more than doubled. It went from 250 to 600. Now you see this term over here, however, connecting these two statements, and this is also an RC concept, which is that, hey, if you see two statements connected by however is a contrast word, this means they kind of go against one another. Okay, so statement 3 supports my main conclusion, which means statement 2 goes against my main conclusion because it's connected by however. Okay, and statement 1 provides me with this context. It really says that, hey, RDS radio stations with RDS technology, they broadcast special program information that only, the word only is a really important keyword, radios with an RDS feature can receive. So essentially what it's saying is, to receive this special program information, you need, a radio station that has that technology, and then you also need that special radio that has that technology. Okay, if you don't have one or the other, you can't receive special program information. Is all of this clear? This part needed to be clear. Okay. All right. So this is what's going on. Context says to receive RDS programming, you need RDS radios, and you also need one part that is missing, is you also need the RDS transmitting stations. In between 94 and 96, the number of radios remain the same. Again, as I said, if you have 10,000 in 94, you have 10,000 in 96. The number of stations more than doubled. Okay. And my conclusion is Very few additional V's received RDS programs. If we had 1 million people in 94, now we have 1 million in 96. Okay. So the question which we have to ask is, in what scenario will there be a significant addition to the number of people receiving this RDS or special programming if the number of radios remain more or less the same, but if I have added a lot more stations? What are the scenarios in which more V's will receive this? Okay, let's see some scenarios. What does more listeners mean? Can you explain? More listeners per device, yes. Some of you are saying more RDS equipped radios. No, that's a constraint. You can't have more RDS equipped radios. You've told that very few additional radios. Okay. Numbers of members in families go up. Yes, more people per RDS. Okay. The second is the range, right? Receivers cannot act as transmitters. There's a reason why they are called receivers. In the context of CR, don't over-engineer a CR question. The person who says receivers act as transmitters, you must be a radio guy. If you're trying to reverse engineer a receiver, don't do that. So there are two scenarios in which this can happen. One is if these additional stations, remember we have a lot more stations, if they cover areas where there was no coverage earlier, okay, if they cover areas where people had the right radio, but there was no coverage earlier, or as some of you have said, if the number of people per radio go up through bigger families, or if we start putting these radios in Starbucks. Does everyone agree if these happen, if either one of these two scenarios happen, my conclusion will break down. My author will be falsified. Okay. So what are my assumptions? The new stations should not increase the coverage significantly, which means they should be transmitting in the similar areas, or people per radio should remain about the same. If you increase the radios, then it will also go up. Yes, but can you increase the radios? Can you increase the number of RDS radios, guys? Can you increase? No, it's given. There are very few additional radios. You cannot go against the facts in the argument. The author says the number of radios remain the same. Then how can you increase the radios? Unless and until you can figure out a way to time travel, which again is not in the context of GMAT. That truly is rocket science, and GMAT isn't rocket science. You can't increase the radios. Don't go against the author, not the factual part at least. Okay, so let me just bring back your poll. Yes. What if stations can send information by other means? No, they can't, because it's given in the argument to you. To receive RDS programming, you need RDS radios and the transmitting stations. You can't go against stuff in the argument. No, don't do that. Okay, that's what makes the process great, guys. That's what makes CR a lot more logical. Probably after we discuss the next question, I'm going to talk about why CR is a part of the GMAT. Okay, so all right, let's see how did people do for this one. RDS technologies. This is how you guys polled. 18% of you, or 21 of you, chose choice A. 21, that is the choice A is the correct option, and only 18% of you got it right. It's a very convoluted choice. Remember, this is an official question, not an e-GMAT question, but it's a beautiful official question. It says, few if any of the RDS stations that began broadcasting in Berlin after 94 broadcast to people with the RDS equipped radios living in areas not previously reached by RDS stations. Very convoluted choice. What do we see when we see an answer choice, especially one that's as convoluted as this one? What do we do? What do we do as the first thing? Step one is, no, don't skip it, don't avoid it. Step one is, Visualize and translate. Then step 2 is asking is it must be true. Simplify, yes. Anyone going through our quant course over here? Anyone over here going through our quant course? Yes. What are the process skills? What are the process skills? Simplify, visualize, translate. All of those apply here as well. Okay, those skills, don't just reserve them for quant. The moment you start applying them in verbal, you're going to find life becomes very easy. Okay, few if any means almost none. Okay, of the RDS equipped radios that began broadcasting after 94. What are the RDS equipped radios that began broadcasting after 94? Those are the new radio stations, those 250 to 600, remember? Broadcast to people who had the right kind of receiving radios, okay? Living in areas not previously reached. What does that mean? Increasing the coverage of RDS programming. So what this choice is saying is almost none of the new radio stations increase the coverage of RDS programming, okay? Now, this is the correct answer. It's in line with our pre-thinking 1. I'm going to look at every answer choice, so don't worry about it if you chose another answer choice. I'm going to justify why every other answer choice is not even close. Okay, so let's negate this. What is the negation of almost none? At least some radio stations increase coverage. If at least some radio stations now transmit to people who had the right kind of radio but did not have any coverage, then can the author say that, hey, the number of overlanders receiving special program information did not increase significantly? Okay. No, he can't really say. The conclusion breaks down, which means it satisfies my must be true test. Okay. Some is one or all, yes, and at least some means at least one, yes. Okay. Everyone, can you see how this choice is in line with our pre-thinking? Can you see that? I'm going to look at every other answer choice, but can you see how this choice is in line with our pre-thinking? Yes, they were part of Worland. Doesn't mean that every part of Worland has RDS coverage. No. Does every part of your city have 5G coverage for cell phones? No, but some parts do. That's what happens when technology comes. Let's look at choice B. Choice B was very popular, very popular. And it's a beautiful demonstration of that must be true condition. Okay. 26% of you chose choice B. You guys can see this over here. Let's translate choice B. Choice B says, in 1996, most Worlanders living within a listening area to an RDS station had the right kind of radio. Okay, if you were to really put this in an equivalent piece, it says most of you today who are in this session have a 5G phone. That's what it's saying. Now, what's my conclusion? What is my conclusion? What is my conclusion, guys? Option A is correct, guys, not incorrect. Option A is correct. The conclusion is the number of Worlanders has not changed much. Yes, remember that? The conclusion is the number of Worlanders has not changed much. Now, what is my definition of an assumption? What is my definition of an assumption? Definition of an assumption is it's an unstated idea that must be true for the conclusion to hold true. Okay. Now, here is a question that I have to ask you. For the number of Worlanders to remain the same, which means let's say in 1994 if I had 1000, and in 1996 that number is to remain 1000 as well, is it required that most Worlanders already have an RDS radio? What if 20% had an RDS radio in 1994 and the same 20% had an RDS radio in 1996? Is that required? Is this most required? No. That most is not required. You could very easily have 20% with an RDS radio 94 and 20% with the RDS radio 1996, and my conclusion could still be true. So does this satisfy the must be true test? Absolutely not. Okay. Remember, the conclusion is about the change of numbers of listeners. It's not about the absolute number of listeners in either 94 or in 96. Okay. Let's look at choice C. Choice C is a very interesting choice. Equipping a radio with RDS technology does not decrease the station's listening area. Now, what kind of programming are we concerned about in my conclusion? What kind of programming am I concerned about? RDS programming, right? Or programming with special information. Let's call it RDS programming. RDS is easier to say. Okay. Everyone agrees? It's RDS programming, right? Everyone. Can I get some more energy, guys? What's going on? Some more energy. You know, if you want to ace the GMAT, you have to kind of look into those pools of energy that you never knew existed. Yeah, it is confusing. It's the most difficult question. So if you're getting 80% of it, you're doing great, because you'll have to go through this again when I give you the PDF. Okay. Now, if a radio station does not have RDS technology, can it transmit special programming or RDS programming? Can it transmit? No. So then what is the range of RDS programming for that radio station if it doesn't have RDS technology? 0. Right? 0, because it can't even transmit it. So when this choice says equipping a radio station with RDS technology does not decrease the station's listening area, or null is a great answer too, which kind of programming by definition is it talking about? RDS or non-RDS? Is it talking about RDS or non-RDS? Whose range can be decreased? Non-RDS programming, other programming, right? Do we care about non-RDS programming in my conclusion? Do I care about it? No. This is out of scope. Had you just looked at the conclusion, you could have rejected this. Yes, you just care about listeners who get special programming, not listeners who get any programming, but special programming only. Remember, there are 2 filters in my conclusion. Actually, one was Verlanders, not listeners, because we're not worried about people who live in other areas, just Verland. And then we are only concerned about special programming. And then the third thing is comparison with 1994. Okay, so we're not concerned about other programming, so this is irrelevant. Choice D was the most popular choice, and it's wrong on many counts. In 1996, Verlanders who did not own radios equipped to receive RDS. Do we care about people who don't have the right kind of radio? Do we care about them? No. If you're worried about use of 5G, do we care about people who only have 4G radios? No, we don't. Could not receive any programming. Do we care about any programming? No. It discusses the wrong people. It discusses the wrong programming. We don't care about them. This is completely irrelevant to what I'm trying to prove as an author. You can receive tons of programs. I don't care, because you're not going to receive RDS programs. Why? Because you don't have the RDS radio. I know that. How can they convert if they don't have the right kind of radio? The author is giving you that constraint. Timothy, the author is telling you that constraint. You have to live within that constraint. Right? You can't break constraints given to you. Let me just share the argument with you so that you can see the constraint. Radio systems with RDS technologies broadcast special program information that only, the word only, radios with RDS feature can receive. When you say only, this means you're not modifying those radios. You can't do anything. Okay. Choice E talks about the kind of programming. We don't care about the kind of programming, so let's worry about it. So, what did you learn from this? This is a very difficult question. And again, as I said, it doesn't matter whether you got it right or wrong, but the reason why we have this is because it has a lot of learning points. When it comes to that mental visualization development, this is a beautiful question. When it comes to rejecting incorrect answer choices and learning how to do that, it's a beautiful question. So what did you learn from this? What did you learn? Importance, simplify. Perfect. How to solve this in 2 minutes? This one is probably 3 minutes, and that's okay because there'll be others that will be 90 seconds. But you'd solve it in 3 minutes if you learn how to visualize. So, and for the timing thing, I think the quant piece is beautiful as there. Okay, simplify and make it a habit. For those of you who've gone through the quant course, right? How long did process skills take early on when you heard about them for the first time, the 6 process skills on the quant side? How long did they take them when you heard about them for the first time? Yeah, it took longer, somewhat longer, but once those process skills became a regular part of your ability to solve questions, what happened in quant? Tremendous improvement, and the pace of improvement is really, really great. In fact, a lot of you know about our verbal courses, right? As e-GMAT, traditionally people know us about our verbal courses. One thing that you probably don't realize is, if you look at March and April data, we have delivered more success than any other prep company. In fact, I think we've delivered 50% more success in quant than TTP has, and that's all because of the new quant courses that Payal has been working on. Okay. And it's still in process, but about 70% of that course is done. Let's look at this. So this one, we're going to go through this very, very quickly. Okay. So what happened last year? Last year, we collected some refuse and we burned everything. All right. We did not recycle anything. And because I couldn't find a good icon for a truck, I actually got a trash can. All right. So how many trucks did I incinerate last year? How many trucks did I incinerate last year? 10, right? So again, it could be 100, but I can't put 100 trash cans here. So this is just look at the count over here, and let's kind of keep a count of 10. All right. So now, given the information in the argument, if I collect the same amount of refuse, how many trucks will I be sending for incineration this year? If I collect the same amount of refuse, given the information in the argument, 5, right? 5. Now here is something which is really important, because I want to understand I want to figure out if you truly understood what's given in the argument or not. So if instead of collecting the same amount of refuse this year, if I collect 10 times as much refuse. So if the amount of refuse that I collect is 10 times as much, if this number is 10 times as much, then how many trucks do you think I'll send for incineration if I collect 10 times as much refuse this year compared to last year? If you answer this question correctly, you're going to find this question and the highway miles question, they're practically identical. It's the logic used is very, very similar. 3, the question is, if I collect 10 times as much garbage or refuse, how many trucks would go for incineration? 3, 2, come on guys, energy. Last year we sent 10. This year the amount of refuse collected is equivalent to 100. But how many do you think I'm going to send for incineration? 3, 2, and 1. Let me end the poll and broadcast the results. only 23% of you say 5. 5 is the correct number, even if you, and you can see how most of you have said 50. That's about 52% of you. And let's kind of see why I'm only going to send 5 trucks even if I collect so much more refuse. Let's look at this piece over here. Hold on, let me just go and remove my annotations. Okay. This year, city services will separate for recycling enough refuse to reduce the number of truckloads to be incinerated to half of last year's number. What they're saying is, regardless of how much garbage you collect, I'm only going to send half as many trucks as I did last year. Can you guys see that? Those of you who chose 50? Regardless of how many trucks, how much garbage I collect. If I sent 10 last year, this is going to be 5. Okay? Even if I collect 100 trucks worth of refuse. So again, we have this, we visualize this. The conclusion is the ash generated this year will be half of last year. Okay. Again, we ask the same falsification question. Under what scenario will the ash generated be greater than 50% even if I only send half as many trucks for incineration? The only scenario is if the ash generated per truckload is higher. If you stuff those trucks so much that even though you only got 5 trucks they generate a lot more ash. So what is my assumption? The ash per truckload is going to remain the same. Is that clear to everyone? Okay. This is how you guys answered. Choice D is the correct answer. 51 of you or 46% of you got it right. But let's look at why is it that you focus on choices A, C, and E over here. So choice A says this year, no materials that are separated for recycling will be incinerated. This is an answer choice. One of the 6 examples that I've found in official questions where this is an answer choice that satisfies my must be true condition. Well, the reason why it is incorrect is because it doesn't provide new information. You can infer this from the argument. Because it doesn't provide any new information, it can't be an assumption over here. Okay. Choice B talks about the cost. We don't care about the cost. So choice B is wrong. Choice C talks about the proportion of recyclable materials. Do we care about the proportion of recyclable materials? No, we don't. Why? Because I'm only going to send half as many truckloads, regardless of that proportion. People who chose choice C, is that clear? Okay. So because I'm going to send half as many truckloads, so that part is irrelevant. Choice D is the correct answer. It's in line with our pre-thinking, so I'm not going to worry about it. You can see the negation test over here. And choice E talks about, actually, let's go to choice E, talks about the total quantity of refuse. We don't care about it. Why? Because I'm only going to send half as many truckloads over here. This is 700 level question. Both these questions are 700 level that we did. And you can see that by accuracy over here. And congratulations if you got it right. Less or lower, not just same, but less or lower. It can also be lower, right? Because you want to reduce the ash by at least 50%. Okay, so what have you learned so far? How are you going to change your behavior going forward? Okay, you're going to start doing pre-thinking. That's good. You're going to start visualizing. You're going to stay more focused. Good. Well, that's really, really good. Again, remember this, go slow. Do not worry about timing. Simplify what you're reading. And so the question that I want to tell you is, the reason you take longer today is because you do back and forth between the argument and the answer choices. Am I correct? The reason you take longer is because you do that back and forth. What's going to happen when you simplify and visualize? You are not going to do that back and forth. Why? Because you know the argument inside out. Okay. Now, when you start to do this, you're going to take longer to simplify and visualize. Why? Because this is a new skill that you're learning. But on the GMAT, there are only so many sentence structures out there. Once you solve those 15, 20 questions, you're going to be familiar with most of those sentence structures because they come in the argument as well as in the answer choices. And when you're familiar with those sentence structures, your timing will improve drastically. As long as you consistently try to simplify and visualize. Okay, simplify and visualize. And follow the process. Do it one step at a time. If you don't follow the process, if you do not do it one step at a time, you're going to find it super confusing. The way we did this with that tenured professor's argument today, right now, that tenured professor's argument probably seems very, very easy, right? Given all the stuff that we've done. And that's kind of where building your ability is. Build that ability to simplify, build that ability to visualize. And you're going to find things are easy. Does pre-thinking apply to all question types? Yes, Payal, it does. Okay. But the takeaway that I want you to have is, pre-thinking is not rocket science. You'd go out there and there are going to be 2 or 3 things you're going to see. You're going to see people who do well and they're going to vouch for pre-thinking. They're going to swear by it. And there are people who would really just say, hey, it doesn't work. Why? Because they don't do it systematically. It's a process. It's a skill. And it takes a certain amount of mental toughness to learn this. But once you get it, once you go from that point 2 to point 3 that I talked about, you're going to find that you're going to achieve accuracy, you're going to achieve efficiency. And unlike others, I'm not going to promise an easy path. Why? Because you're not taking an easy journey. You want to get that 730 score. Only 5% of the people get that. So what are the next steps? Please go through these files. If you're an e-GMAT student, you have the paid version, which is way more comprehensive. But if you're a free trial student, experiment this. See if this learning style fits you. Okay. If you're an e-GMAT student, then this is something that you will go through, where you'll learn the basic concepts in an introduction to assumption, logical gap, and 2 entities. Then you'll learn about how to deal with segments, how to deal with comparison. A lot of these answer choices had comparisons in there. How to deal with quant-related arguments. Then you'll go through application files and practice files. All of this is just in assumptions. Okay. This is an architecture which is designed to ensure learning. We teach you concepts, we evaluate you on concepts, we give you personalized feedback on concepts. Then we teach you application, we evaluate you on application, we give you personalized feedback. And this personalized feedback is really important. Why? Because as I said, each one of you is different. Each one of you will have your own strengths and weaknesses. Each one of you will be comfortable with certain sort of context and not as comfortable, which means this feedback will enable you to revise the stuff that you're not as comfortable with right then and there. And then we have qualifying exercises, which is where you see these over here. These are qualifying exercises. Once you do this, you will have scores over here. You will have your time tracked over here. You'll have your attempts tracked over here. Okay. And that's really important. And just to tell you how comprehensive this is many orders of magnitude more comprehensive than any other resource out there. Okay. And here are examples of people who've improved. Anupriya, one of our former students, went to ISB, improved from a V32 to a V46, which is a 99 percentile. And she did that in 20 days, but she spent about 5 hours a day. So it wasn't a typical 20-day, but for her, the thing is, she studied one thing, perfected it, studied the next thing, perfected it, and so on and so forth. Okay. Here's another student who improved from a 570 to a 640. And this guy thought he was really good in CR. He says, as someone who taught physics at an undergraduate level, I thought I was really good at CR, good grasp of logic. But he faltered. He says, language has a way of manipulating your mind. Some of you talked about answer choices being confusing. He fell in the same trap. He says, the GMAT's particularly good at using language to fool you. Spend that time doing pre-thinking and you're going to find life becomes a lot easier. When you get the PDF, you can click on this and this. So as next steps, start doing pre-thinking. And in 10 days, it'll take you a good 10 days, about 40 hours if you're at that 30th percentile. but you can get to that 70th, 75th percentile in another couple of days, get to that 90th percentile or so. Okay. So with that, I want to thank you for joining me. I'm going to take any questions that you have. Again, if you can put those questions in the Q&A pod, that way I have the short answer pod available to me. Let me share the session handout over here. I have my GMAT on 16th of May and I'm 49 percentile in CR. How can I improve with practice? No, you don't improve with practice. We're at 49 percentile. You are in stage 1 of learning. You have to learn the concepts and methods. You can't improve it in practice. But in 24 to 30 hours, you can get to that 70th percentile, not to that 90th percentile. That takes longer. Okay. But again, I would say move the GMAT, man. What's the hurry with regards to taking it on the 16th? And for those of you who've not subscribed to our YouTube channel, here are the links to this, as well as some of these success stories that I talked about. Karthik's success story is here, Anupriya's is here, Jim's here as well. What's a V48, V32? Okay, let me just answer this. You can see this response over here. How to revise concepts when you move from verbal to contours? Is there a strategy that you would suggest? Yes. You know, there are 3 or 4 strategies that you can look at. One is if you've bookmark questions in Scholaranium, you can replay that bookmark list. If you've taken notes, you can do that. And you can take notes throughout the e-GMAT journey. Overall, that's the way you would do. Is online GMAT more effective than offline GMAT? They're identical. We actually will likely be hosting a webinar with the GMAC. I'm going to actually share the recording of a prior webinar that I had with the GMAC. Here's a webinar that I hosted some time back, and this is, you can actually see me over here. Actually, if you put the question in the Q&A pod, one of the other benefits is I can share the response over here. But you can click on this with the YouTube link that just came in, and you can watch the difference between an online GMAT versus the in-center GMAT. How do you assess if you're ready for the test? Consistency in scores in Scholaranium. You know, you do well in your test readiness quizzes, and you have a consistent set of mock scores. Those 3 things. If you're an e-GMAT student, you probably are in touch with the e-GMAT team. Okay, guys. On the right-hand side, stuff for. Please don't put your questions on the right-hand side. I'm going to clear the questions. Questions should be there in the Q&A pod. Okay. This is, I want your learnings from the webinar right now, and I can tell you where the next webinars are. Let me bring that piece over here, upcoming over here. So remember, we have the Scholaranium session. Hold on. We have an algebra webinar tomorrow, and we have a GMAT strategy webinar. So you can click on the algebra, you can click on GMAT strategy. Okay. And we have the Scholaranium launch event, which is on Tuesday. If you want to know about e-GMAT, the history, how we invest, definitely click on this one over here. Get your event pass. Okay. Here is the link to the Scholaranium webinar. How do you avoid lip reading? You know, just avoid it. That's something that I would say I try and do because I was an avid lip reader. I know do as well. If you're taking the online GMAT, it takes effort. I will tell you. And yeah, so that's something which is there. How do you shortlist universities? What should be kept in mind? Okay. Let me just tell you. How do you select a business school? Here is how you go about selecting business school. Are all classes live and interactive? We are a self-paced learning course. We try and mimic what a private tutor does. We do have some free sessions like this, but we don't have live classes, Ankit. No, our courses are probably 5 times as effective as a live classroom course. Live classroom courses are generic. We offer self-paced learning courses with probably the world's best support that exists. So we don't provide live classes just because we found that they're not effective. Some people, I mean, they're not customized to you as an individual. And look at our reviews and read the kind of personalization we do overall, and try the free trial out. Q50 and V22, how long will it take to get a 730 plus? I would like to see some more details, but if I were to guess, it'll take about V22, 610, 730, probably 150 hours of effort. And depending on how long does it take for you to put in those 150 hours, is how long it'll take for you to ace the GMAT. Ramat says, I keep procrastinating my practice as a daily routine. Should I take up my test rate as a driving factor? Ramat, if that works for you, then yes, absolutely do that. It just depends on the kind of individual you are. I've seen that do work well for a few individuals. I've seen that backfire for a few individuals. And again, you've had 25 years of learning history. You know what works for you with regards to this, and I think just leverage what works for you. And if you want to really see people who've done this, you can just look at our success story playlist, and you'll see people who've done both. Here is a link to this, but again, be governed by what works for you. Paridhi says, if I plan to take the GMAT next year, I've not done, how many hours do I need? Paridhi, I can't tell you this because I don't have your SigmaX mock score. So if you take a SigmaX mock, then, and if you share those results with me, I can tell you with a good degree of precision as to how long it will tell you. Everyone needs this thing. If you scored a 690, Ahmed, then with support from e-GMAT mentors, you'd probably take between 50 and 70 hours to get a 740. Okay, and you have a Q48 V34. You say you have got a 690 on SigmaX, you got a 680, I think, on the official. Yeah, so yeah, it's a between 50 and 70, 45 and 70 or so. And then we've had lots of people who've gotten to that. I mean, Jim's example is such, he went from 700 to 770. Yeah, you can watch that over here. Do you have any tips on choosing executive MBA? Let me actually, Amit. GMAT Online is what you need, not Quant Online. Do those 40s, 50? Yes, all the time that we includes, of course, that learning piece. That's really important. Link to SigmaX mock test. I shared the link just now. Sandeep, if you want to share that link to SigmaX mock test, actually, I can share it once again. Yes. Do you have any tips on choosing B school for executive MBA? Renee, so it's the logic, the method for choosing a B school doesn't change. The key thing that you're looking for as again, first of all, Renee, the question is, you're doing an EMBA in India or in the US, because they are completely different MBAs in India or US. So where are you trying to do? Because an EMBA in the US is really a full-time MBA, which is there for people who have 8 or 10 years of experience. An EMBA in the US is very, very different. It's for people who are truly executives. So the tips would go. Exec MBA, India is really a full-time MBA. I mean, go to IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore. Frankly, you have to choose, do you want to do that versus going to ISB? And where people have that kind of experience. And I mean, both IIM Ahmedabad and Bangalore are great places to be. Okay. What about Europe? Europe, I am not as well versed with executive MBA in Europe, but I'm pretty much know all the top admission consultants. We are one of the gold sponsors for AGAC, which is where the Association for Graduate Admissions Council. So I can definitely put that question out in on my LinkedIn and then some of the top admission consultants. You'd get much better answers than what I could give you. So send that question to me, and if I can tag you in that, then that'd be great. If in the post, so that you get the answer as well. Exec MBA for an army officer with 20 years of experience. Baljeet, so most MBA, most defense officers have, do the GMAT. Do their MBA post 15 years of experience. So it's a great choice. I mean, what's your question? I mean, IIM Ahmedabad and Bangalore are both great options. I would not go for the lower ranked IIMs. It's just I haven't seen enough validation there. I've not seen enough salary increases over there. So I'm gonna actually share. I think we have a couple of students who did an exec MBA that I have on YouTube. Let me just see. Usually, if you want anything, just Google e-GMAT plus that term. You'd probably get a decent result most of the time. Okay, let me look at this. Vishaka says they come across people who say finding a job in the UK after an MBA is tedious as people don't want to sponsor visas. Is it true for LBS and INSEAD? No, it's not true for LBS and INSEAD. US MBA, no, not a problem. One thing that I'll tell you is, and this is something, again, if you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, this is a question that a lot of our students have, and when they go to get a 740, they ask this question, and I have answered this question a few times, and I'm going to probably create a video about it. I'm going to actually share an article with you. So this is an article that I wrote. It's a very fairly long article that I wrote a long time back. How all this H1B problems that you guys hear are actually wonderful news for you guys. It's a 10-page article, so you'll take some time. But essentially, and I'm going to address the UK issue as well as the US issue along the same lines. So H1B visa, the 85,000 visa slots, and companies such as TCS, Satyam, Infosys, they abuse that system. Why? Because if they have one opening in the US, they essentially will put in 4 applicants over there. So overall, for those 85,000 slots, what used to happen in 2015, 2016, before Trump came in, is that you'd have about 400,000 applications. Now, 80% of those applications were for people who were making $64,000 or so. Why? Because the criteria to get an H-1B visa, the minimum salary that was needed was $60,000. Okay. And so if you think about it, H-1B was a specialty visa. That $60,000 cap was put in 1998 during the Y2K era, for those of you still old enough to know what Y2K meant. And that cap wasn't revised by the US Congress. So 80% of those slots went to Infosys and Satyam and TCS and IBM's India division because of these abuses. And as a result, if you were an MBA student in 2014, 2015, even though you had a job that gave you $150,000, you would still not qualify. There were chances you would still not qualify for the lottery because it was a lottery. It didn't differentiate between people who made 150 versus who made a 65K. What Trump did, and one of the few good things that he did, is that he said, I'm going to prioritize people who make more money. So in 2019, applications by about 60% of the applications by TCS, Satyam and all got rejected. However, if as an Amazon, you put in an application where you were making 150K, there was a 99% chance that you would get approved. Okay. And because of that, B schools really did well. With regards to if you were a B school student who wanted to work in tech, consulting or finance, not in CPG, but in tech, consulting or finance, you had the slots, you had the jobs. Again, top business schools or so. Is LBS not a vice choice? No, LBS is great. The same thing as in Europe. Europe also, HEC, LBS, INSEAD, great choices. You will not have problems with your visa. What is a good GMAT score for scholarships? Let me just tell you. Short answer, 740 or higher. Okay, that's something that you should look at. And here you will see the self-paced classes will be on a similar platform. Self-paced would be on our platform, which is where we spend upwards of $10 million of engineering. And they're all by Payal. It's not even by me. Payal is our head faculty. I'm a bad faculty, guys. I'm not the best e-GMAT instructor over here. MIM or MBA in the US without work experience? MIM. You can't get into a B school. You can only do an MIM if you don't have work experience. Does it make sense for me to apply to top B schools with just 2 years of work ex? Likely not. I will say that likely not, yeah, but I mean that if that experience is in a startup where you've had, done wonderful things, then maybe you have a slim chance. 2 years is like the bare minimum. I would recommend adding 1 more year. Does being a CA from India have an impact on the profile? I don't know how to answer that question for a very simple reason that, when you look at an MBA, what we look for are leadership abilities. CA is a technical skill. An engineer is a technical skill. We don't care as much as to, whether you're an engineer or a CA. What we care is, or even a lawyer, what we care about is that if you are a CA, what have you done? And if you say, if all I've done is spreadsheets and I've not influenced people, then you're not a great candidate. But if you've influenced people, if you've done good negotiations, if you've convinced people to follow your way, then essentially you are a great guy. If you want to understand this, again, our YouTube channel where we talk about how did people get into top business schools is a wonderful channel for you. And again, you can really see every business school discussed over here. Let me just, so as I said, we're bringing our former students, and over here, let me see. So watch some videos here. Should a person with 9 years of experience and non-managerial position go for an EMBA? Shashi, it depends on, again, if you're talking about EMBA in India, then yes, that's like a full-time MBA for people like you. In the US, an EMBA is for people who are executives who have most of the skills that an MBA possesses, but they need to sharpen their skills only in a few areas. So again, in India, yes, you should go for an EMBA. Do you need IELTS or TOEFL even if your previous learning medium was English? In most US universities, you do, and also in the UK universities. Again, for the very simple reason that most B schools are not independent entities, they're part of a university system, and this is a university requirement. And again, it sucks. I understand that, but trust me, if you do the GMAT, doing TOEFL or IELTS is going to be a cakewalk. I can just tell you my experience when I took the GMAT. I took the GMAT in March of 2003. I did not study anything beyond that, and I took my TOEFL on I think 14th 15th of July 2003, and I only started studying for TOEFL the night before. For the GMAT, I had to study for 4 months, but that built enough capability that I could study. I could just ace the TOEFL with just one night of studying. Aditi says, I got an 8 on my IELTS. How likely am I going to get a good GMAT score? IELTS doesn't matter. The GMAT's a much more logical test. You will have a decent foundation, take a Sigma X mock. That would tell you. How do you make your profile diverse for MBA applications? Don't worry about making your profile diverse. Be who you are, Aditi. Just focus on making an impact in your organization. I actually conducted an interview with a McKinsey guy, and
Leaks, like it's not like all the Harvard people.
so watch this interview, and this is a guy who got rejected 9 times because he tried to make his profile something in the first round. In the second round, he actually just tried to be himself, and he was just fine, and he got into Duke. So here is the guy. Yeah, you should have seen the link to McKinsey guy come in. Vishaka says, I have 6 years of work experience. So Vishaka, being a manager is not an important piece. It's being a leader is important. A lot of people confuse leadership with management. So let me share an article to really talk about what is leadership. And this is by one of our partners, Poonam, and you can read this article. You'll get to know what leadership is about. How are B schools in Germany? I love Germany. I lived there. I consider that to be my house. I go to Germany pretty much every other year. How are B schools in Germany? So I don't know how should I answer this question. So B schools in Germany won't pay you as much. I'm going to talk about facts. They won't pay you as much as well B schools in the US or in the UK, because business education is not considered as central to the German culture as is education in the US or in the UK. Having said that, if you go to the better ones, the ones in Frankfurt or Munich, you'd probably get a good job, and the education is really cheap. So it depends on what you're looking for, Yogesh. I love Germany as a country. I just don't love their taxes. Is working with an embassy considered to be international experience? Yes and no. I mean, pretty much all of us today have international experience. Let me just say this very, very clearly. I mean, unless and until you're working in a cave, you work internationally. We work across borders. So that piece is, it used to be a thing 10 years ago, not today. As long as you've worked with people in the US and Europe over Zoom, you've international experience. Okay, guys, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining me today. It was wonderful having you guys. I will look forward to seeing you guys on e-GMAT.com. Also, if you get a chance, connect with me on LinkedIn and on my YouTube channel or so. Uh, and if there are questions that I've not been able to answer, send those over to me. If I can answer them, I will be happy to. Thank you very much and have a great day. And I'll see you guys in the session tomorrow.